So the way I'd like to do this is somewhat interactive. So I'm going to present these 7 keys, and after each presentation, hear your feedback, hear your realizations, hear your thoughts, disagreements. Yeah, just leave it with PJ. Okay? So let's begin. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Titanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So Gopal Bhatta Prabhu got on my case because when he asked me what I was going to present this year, I said, well, I'll present what I presented last year. And he said, no, can't do that. Can't do that. No rehashing of old stuff, he said. So you have to come up with something about the future. So I thought about it and consulted with some devotees, and I came up with these 7 keys. Okay? And the first one, and I think first one is having someone to talk to. I think I'll just put the bullet points all in a row like that. But, you know, all of us struggle at some time in our Krishna consciousness, not necessarily with the regulated principles, but we may have some doubts or some health challenges or some interpersonal challenges. Can you see? You know, everyone struggles sometimes, and we all need someone to talk to. Right? And you know, I don't have my cell phone with me right now, Krishna's mercy, but you know, we are more exposed in one sense to Maya than we ever were before. Anyone who has a cell phone with an internet connection can contact the most terrible kind of Maya in 5 seconds, right? And even just any information. Like if I ask somebody who has a cell phone here who's connected, okay, Prabhu, can you find out the weather in Kuala Lumpur, please? So like, you know, before 20 years ago, how would you find out the weather in Kuala Lumpur? And now here in Sridham Mayapur, in the middle of rural West Bengal, of course, the center of the universe, in a few seconds we can find out the weather in Kuala Lumpur or whatever. We're just bombarded by things, and it's, what? 28 degrees. See? Amazing, right? I mean, who cares? But the point is, you know, we have so much. When I lived in Vrindavan from 1989, I didn't know what was happening in the world. I couldn't read the Hindi newspapers. I didn't have a radio to find out, you know, whatever it's called, you know, BBC or something like that. I had no idea. But now you can, you know, we could keep up like in, what do they call it, in real time with so many things. So we have that. And, you know, every devotee needs the access to a devotee that they can speak to, that they can trust, and they know is going to keep confidential. But we're afraid, right? We're afraid of our reputation. We're afraid if we tell so-and-so, and then they tell so. You know what it's like? Often you say, Shamananda Prabhu, I'm going to tell you something about Navina Nirada, but you promise you won't tell anyone? Right? And then I go, and then he goes to Yadunandan Maharaj and said, Yadunandan Maharaj, I have something to tell you, but you've got to promise you won't tell anyone else. And in this way, the whole world finds out, right? So we're afraid about our reputation. And, you know, just putting up a facade like everything is okay, right? It's actually not so hard to fake it. You just have your hand in the bead bags at the right time, right? And wear the dress in the right way. And no one knows that inside, what is it? John Lennon once said, one thing you can't hide is when you're crippled inside. So we don't want facades, and we also don't want to just lower the standards. Oh, it's, you know, it's okay. 3.5 regulated principles, or, you know, or 3 regulated principles, no meat, fish, or eggs, bas, right? Like that. So we don't want to lower the standards, but we do want someone to talk to. And whether that someone is going to be heavy with us or be very mellow with us, the main thing I think is that they're confidential and that you can trust them and that they won't tell anyone else. And I think that's a real, you know, to have a system in place for this. You know, reading Yadunandan Maharaj's book on sannyas, how many of those sannyasis would have benefited, especially the ones that struggled, by having someone to talk to, right, that they could trust? Yeah. So, and then our general mood in our society should be to reform devotees and not, you know, reject them. That's a whole nother topic. So some thoughts, questions on this point about having someone to talk to? Well, this is a lively audience. Oh, yes, Prabhu. Go. Yes, Prabhu.
I have heard about this principle earlier, and while practicing that, the devotees come and they dump everything, and then they go away. Then it's like, I'm sitting with the baggage on my head. And then when you say the confidentiality has to be maintained, how do we balance that?
Well, you're right that it takes some training. This one I experience a lot because I'm an ombudsman for ISKCON, and an ombudsman, one of our 4 regulated principles is confidentiality. So unless there's imminent risk of serious harm, I don't reveal whatever someone tells me to anyone without their permission. So I get a lot of devotees telling me things, and they say, my God, it's so nice that I had someone to talk to. Now, for the person who is being heard, for the person who's hearing, there is some training to be careful about things like there's something called compassion fatigue, where you just, you're always hearing about other people's issues so much that, it starts affecting your own consciousness. But there's training for that, and also the idea that that person also has someone confidential that they can talk to. Is that all right? Other thoughts? Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Sumita Krishna. We need someone. Young brahmachari is always the best person to run. Although Navina did a good job the other day with Vaisheshika Prabhu. And here's a temple president, Uvacha.
Yeah, we have in Christianity, every Sunday they go to church and go confess. And they have faith in the Father and they just pour out everything. But even in a devotee relationship, they may be afraid that if I tell something to somebody, he may put internet and WhatsApp and makes my name like that.
Yeah.
So that's a difficult
yes.
living to us.
Yeah, reputation is a really serious thing. I remember one time Shiva Ram Maharaj saying that for a sannyasi, reputation is all he has. And, and we're very concerned about that. And so it's a big issue. Shall we move on? Or anyone else like to? Yes, Prabhu. Wait.
Where can we draw a line to have the reforms and rejection?
Oh, where can we draw the line between reform and rejection? As Prabhupada answered in a different way, to a different point, that takes some intelligence. It does take some discrimination. But obviously, if we didn't believe in reform, none of us would be sitting here today, right? If we didn't think we can get better and become freed from material desires and actually become true devotees of Krishna, why are we here? So it is it's a very good question. There's something that we're trying to establish in ISKCON. It's a non-devotee term, restorative justice. But the idea behind it is to restore the relationships that are sometimes broken by people who make mistakes or take advantage of others. It's a deep topic which we don't have time for here, but it's a good question. I think now that I think about it, I think the main criteria is if that person can hurt others, right? Like, for example, let's use child abuse. If someone is actually, seen, convicted of child abuse, then our first thing is to protect the other innocent children, right? We don't want to reform him and put him in charge of a school or something, right? So that's, I think, the first criteria about protecting others. And then from there, if that's not an issue, then we take each case as it comes. Is that all right? Okay, let's move on. Innovation without compromising our principles. So we have our eternal Shastric principles that must never change. The Yuga Dharma, for example, right? And Sambandha, Abhiteya, Prayojana, and the 5 most potent items of bhakti, and so many things that we are, that are just eternal principles. Yet any Vaishnava that preaches is automatically, if they want to be effective, they're going to be looking at things according to time, place, and circumstance. And, making adjustments in ISKCON didn't end with Prabhupada's disappearance, right? So this was when Vraja Prabhu asked Prabhupada, how do you know the difference between a principle and a detail? That's when Prabhupada said, that takes a little intelligence. And regarding principles and details, if in the 6th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, right in the beginning, Prabhupada writes that a basic principle is that one has to accept a spiritual master. Exactly how one follows the instructions of a spiritual master is considered a detail. For example, if one is following the instructions of his spiritual master, and that instruction is different from the instructions of another spiritual master, that is called detailed information. But the basic principle of acceptance of a spiritual master is good everywhere, although the details may be different. So here's the actual exchange. Shruti Kirti. Shruti Kirti, as he moved to massage Prabhupada's side, asked, Prabhupada, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing a principle? Prabhupada's eyes closed, and Shruti Kirti continued to massage. After a few moments, Prabhupada opened his eyes and said, that takes a little intelligence. So has anything changed between now and 1977 in the world? What are some of the differences? Lots, like name one or two. Internet, that's probably the biggest one, right? Social media, part of internet, yeah. Could you imagine there was the Prabhupada was concerned about us using the telex machine? Telex machine, he said we would talk per jalpa. So to speak of, someone who's getting, I usually get 100 emails a day. So, could you imagine getting 100? Yeah. Any other changes in the world? Attitude on people. Yeah, the attitude of people. Economics has changed. So many things have changed, right? Has India changed at all since 77? Right? When I moved to India and my son was born in India, I was born in Vrindavan, and we wanted to tell my mother that she was a grandmother for the first time. And so there was one phone in all of Vrindavan that could call overseas, and you had to book the call. And even then you had to yell, it's a boy, it's a boy. What? It's a boy. Now many of us have two phones. Right? And we have video conferencing. Yes, so much has changed. Right? So how to have innovation and not compromise our Krishna conscious principles. I think that is a real key to our success. And therefore, Prabhupada said, with all GBC and senior men present, we should discuss how to make unity in diversity. But if we fight on account of diversity, that is simply the material platform. Please try to maintain the philosophy of unity and diversity. That will make our movement successful. And often this is what we tend to argue about, right? And are we arguing about principles or details? I think that's a big question. Some thoughts on this?
Sometimes innovations can also be detrimental.
Sometimes innovations can? I didn't hear the word instrumental? Detrimental, yes. Sometimes, yes. Naveen Nirapu.
Yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of talk between left wing and right wing. I mean, talk is a gentle description of what's going on. A lot of fighting, a lot of disagreeing, a lot of arguments. Very little energy is actually being put out into the field of actually interacting with the public. I even see here, we're mostly talking to the small inner circle, very small core. And I find more and more devotees who are partly dealing with the outside world, but they're more concerned with our little group.
Right.
So, why so much argument and so much talk and so little output, so to speak?
Why? Well, you could probably answer better than me, but if you're asking me, well, one thing it is, which yuga is it? Oh yeah, Kali Yuga. I mean, I sometimes I try to meditate on that the Shastra is not joking. It really is Kali Yuga. I mean, it really is. It really is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, and we see it. But your point is well taken. That when we get into it, in America they call it navel gazing. You're just looking at your belly button instead of what's happening in the world, and people are dying every day without Krishna consciousness and all that. And also that is one of the cures, isn't it? To just get absorbed in hearing, chanting, and spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. Yeah. Well, that's a very good segue into the next key. So, respectful dialogue instead of defeatist debate. So this is an important, these three words are important. This is in chapter 10, verse 32 of the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada writes that among logicians, there are different kinds of arguments. Supporting one's argument with evidence that supports the opposite side is called jalpa. Merely trying to defeat one's opponent is called vitanda. But the actual conclusion is called vada. This conclusive truth is a representation of Krishna. And then Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu translates one of the Acharya's comments on this, and he says, he translates, Nyaya, logic, teaches various ways to reach a conclusion, including vitanda, vada, and jalpa. Krishna says, I am vada, the natural conclusion. Vada is debate carried out fairly according to standard rules, without trying to force the establishment of a particular conclusion. Vitanda is quibbling or merely destructive argument in which one tries to defeat the opponent by any means possible, but does nothing substantial to positively prove one's own thesis. Jalpa, using various deceptive means to fool the opposition, is unfair argument. Vitanda and jalpa are forms of argument in which winning, not necessarily determining the truth, is the main consideration. So, and my experience is that when devotees can enter into a dialogue in a cooperative mood, Krishna manifests. Just yesterday I did a mediation between, I won't mention names, but between two senior leaders, and they, at the beginning of the mediation, they were at odds about a certain issue, and just by talking to each other, developing some understanding of the other person's point of view, after 2 hours, they had worked out their differences and hugged each other and went off to take prasadam. So it's possible, but one of the things, I'm not exactly answering your question, Navina, but I'm talking more about the internal. But I think one of the things that really makes things really difficult for us and makes our conflict sometimes more intense is because of what we would call identity issues, right? So for all of us in this room, probably, we put a lot of our identity into being a member of ISKCON, into being a devotee of Krishna. How many of you, your parents were not so happy when you became a devotee? Okay. So we had to disappoint our parents, right? We probably changed our friends. I remember many devotees had this experience. You go back to your friends and you say, I found it. What we've been looking for, this is it. And they look at us like, are you nuts? Right? So we change our friends, we change our hairstyle, we change our dress, we start wearing sheets, we change our eating habits. We put a lot of our identity into being a devotee. And then along comes another devotee who put all of their identity in, but they have a very different view maybe of Prabhupada, maybe of how ISKCON should be. And that's a lot more intense. I work for the federal government in America. That's a lot more intense, our identity with Prabhupada and ISKCON than someone who's working at a job someplace. They also have conflicts, but they're not quite as intense. So there's some research that faith-based organizations have all the regular causes of conflict that any family, any institution has, and then we have these three extras, One is identity. One is sometimes, this is maybe more in Christian churches, but I think it's in ISKCON a little bit, the blurred line between volunteers and people maintained by the organization, or we could say temple devotees and congregation, right? And then the third one is, should our temples be places of shanti? You find the material world such a terrible place. We come there to just Hare Krishna and see the deities, take prasadam. Or should they be more like bases by which, we send out our soldiers to drop bombs in the laps of the conditioned souls? Prabhupada wrote that, just like in wartime, the bombs are falling from the sky like anything, he wrote. So that tension is sometimes, at least in a lot of organizations, a cause of conflict. And when Prabhupada was asked, after a sannyasi had left ISKCON and with some of their followers and kind of left the society, a devotee asked, well, if we see him, what should we do? And Prabhupada said, we should respect him. A Vaishnava respects even an ant. So I think a key to our discussions should be respectful. And as Navina Nira Prabhu was pointing out, they're not always like that, right? So I thought I'd give a little, oops. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't move this. There we go. The difference between debate and dialogue. So debate is when we assume we have the right answer, and dialogue is when we assume that others may have a piece of the answer, and together we can find a solution. Debate is combative, a dialogue is collaborative. A debate is about winning, a dialogue is about vada, looking for the truth, right? A debate is listening to find the faults in the other person's arguments, and a dialogue is trying to understand the other person, right? And you can read the others. So I think a real key for ISKCON going forward, as Navina Nirodha was kind of pointing out, bringing up, is we have respectful dialogues rather than just trying to defeat each other. And as someone pointed out about social media and the internet, it makes it so much harder to do that. It's 11 o'clock at night, steam's coming out of your ears, your keyboard's on fire, and you type something that you probably wouldn't say to someone face to face, and then they see it the next morning and they get even more upset. It reminds me of Prabhupada said in Bengal when he was a child, if two children were mischievous, they would face each other and they each had to grab each other's ears, right? And as one pulled down and felt some pain, that would inspire him to pull down harder to cause the other person more pain. As they felt more pain, and like this, it was this downward spiral. So I think this is a real key for our future, is to get accustomed to having dialogue and not just never-ending debate. Some thoughts? Yes, Prabhu. There's a microphone. Where is the mic?
So I have one insight regarding people bring two sides of the Prabhupada's quote. For example, when we debate about ahimsa, food becoming, we are vegetarian with Krishna Prasadam, and after that there is so details into what level of food one should choose or what is the wrong food. So when it comes to an example of ahimsa, then quote about how ahimsa should be required and to be done, like especially ahimsa milk. And then people give quote on the other side. And Prabhupada had even said in one of his conversations that if you don't find milk, somebody said that the milk has vitamin D and it may have a fish oil, then Prabhupada said, yes, he can still drink because milk should not be abandoned.
Right.
So in that connection, how do we really make collaborative efforts to...
Well, the Ravindra Supu used to use the example, of course, those from India may not have direct experience of this, but we would have snowball fights with Prabhupada quotes. You take your Prabhupada quote and you throw it at them, and then they take their Prabhupada quote and throw it at you, like that. So a dialogue instead of a debate would try to look at everything Srila Prabhupada said on a topic, because he would sometimes say different things according to time, place, and circumstance, and try to calmly, in a sattvic way, have a discussion to try to understand his desire on any particular issue. But the thing, the other example I gave when I gave this class last time was when I grew up during the holiday season in December, we would get these boxes of chocolates, and there was if you could understand, there'd be like 20 little pieces of chocolate in like a wrapper, okay? That you could see them. So there was milk chocolate and dark chocolate. Okay, sorry about talking about chocolate. It's almost lunchtime. And my brother and I liked the milk chocolate and we didn't like the dark chocolate. So we picked the ones that we liked. And by New Year's, all the dark chocolate was still there and milk chocolate was gone, right? So similarly, we picked the Prabhupada quotes that we like, and we kind of leave the other, we kind of just somehow or other ignore the other ones a little bit. Like that. So what we want to do is try to look at complete Prabhupada. And he would say things that different, the Hari Prabhu tells that story about him being in the room with Srila Prabhupada, and a sannyasi comes in, and Prabhupada says, "You're a sannyasi, you should not stay in one place more than 3 days, you should constantly travel and preach." Sannyasi pays obeisances, goes out the room. A few minutes later, another sannyasi comes, pays obeisances, and Prabhupada says, "You're a sannyasi, you should stay in one place and become the temple president." And Hari Prabhu, because he heard both, right? He was a little confused. And then Prabhupada said, "Well, do you think the spiritual master is like a dull stone? He can't give one disciple one instruction and another disciple another instruction." So, is that okay? Other thoughts on this point? Okay, be like that. All right, I have to backpedal now. Okay, so we did this, right? Respectful dialogue rather than defeatism debate. So the next one, I've been thinking about this a while, and maybe because I lived in Vrindavan for so many years, but our senior devotees, as they grow in age, a lot of our senior devotees are now in their 60s and 70s. Satru Maharaj is 81 now, I think, we senior devotees need a place and a time to associate with like-minded devotees and talk about, I'm not talking about the Gopi Bhava Club or anything like that, but our goal is to follow in the footsteps of Krishna's eternal servants in Vrindavans. What is that? Seva sadhaka rupena, siddha rupena chaturhi, right? So there should be facility for making sure that our senior devotees are constantly getting a high taste in Krishna consciousness. And at the same time, of course, always, preaching that we'll always be hopefully preaching the ABCs, because if we are, that means we always have new people joining, right? So even when we're preaching the ABCs, senior devotees should have some place to really make sure that they're also getting a higher taste in Krishna consciousness and having that balance between of course, the most important work of spreading Krishna consciousness and also having a really fulfilling inner life of Krishna consciousness. Right? Vaisheshika Prabhu spoke about this yesterday. What does he say? Keeping alive? Yeah. Keep the transcendental vibrations. Yeah, there's a Beach Boys song by that song. Yeah. Some thoughts on this? Yes.
You could have just written. Prabhu, you could have just written seeking deep Krishna consciousness. Why did you write sanely?
Sanely, well, maybe because I picked sanely. Thank you for that question. I picked sanely. The question was, why did I add the word sanely? He said I could have just said seeking deep Krishna consciousness. Well, maybe because I was in Vrindavan in the 90s. That might be one reason. And there were some, it became a super controversial thing in our society. And it also reminded me of one sannyasi who wrote a offering to Srila Prabhupada, a Vyasa Puja offering. And in one line it said, Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness for the simple and sane. Oh, Krishna prem for the simple and sane. right? And we talked about this last time, that if you think about it, Prabhupada gave us Braj Bhakti in such a nice way. You know, the two verses in the Guru Vastak, right? You know, Shri Radhika Madhavi and Nikunja Yungno. And then of all the prayers, there's so many different prayers to Tulsi Devi, he picked a very exalted, very intimate prayer, right? All the brahmacharis are there praying that in their next life they're going to become women. Right? Well, gopis, but you know, right? Seva adi karo diye koro nija dasi. David Kanandan will remember this. We had this one Dadu in Vrindavan who was really into the Sakya. He wanted to be a cowherd boy. So if you stood next to him at Tulsi Puja, he would say, Seva adi karo diye koro nija daso. Right. So that's what I meant by sanely, you know, and also sanely means that you don't start telling new bhaktas and new devotees, you know, you keep certain things more close to your chest. Otherwise, not everyone always thinks, oh, I don't have the adhikari that senior devotee has. I should also. Right? Whereas they should be focusing on getting up early in the morning, going to Mangala, you know, like that. One of the symptoms of devotee is that he's sane. That would be nice. More of us are sane. Other thoughts? Yes, David. Wait, the microphone is right here. Wait.
Internal and external part. Internally it is to taste the Krishna prem, but externally it is to bridge anything.
Thank you. And the way Prabhupada mentions it in the Nectar of Devotion is that even advanced devotee, he says, acts like a neophyte, which if you go through the Sanskrit means Vaidhi Bhakti. Even if they're practicing a higher, they always externally, right? Like Rupa Goswami is, you know, chanting on his beads, paying obeisances, doing all those things that sadhaka does. Internally, Rupa Manjari and, you know, yeah, like that. Thank you. Other thoughts? Yes. Microphone's coming your way.
Integrity being the foundation of any devotee's life. What do you mean by the last point of private and inner life?
What was the first line? The first sentence?
Integrity being the foundation of any devotee's life.
Okay.
What do you mean by that? How private and inner life is important?
And what is, I think I understand what you're trying to get at, that you're saying that a devotee shouldn't have a difference between his internal and external life. Is that what you're trying to say? Double standard, yeah. So we're certainly not talking about a double standard. We should always act with integrity. But one, like in the Nectar of Instruction, for example, it talks that we associate differently when we're with our seniors, when we're with our peers, when we're with our juniors. So that's not acting without integrity when we act differently according to who we're associating with, right? So all we're saying here is that when in developing our Krishna consciousness, our internal prayer, our chanting, especially I think our life of prayer and developing desires should be very much alive, like that. But you wouldn't necessarily tell a new devotee some of your innermost desires, right? Because there's a difference between seniors and juniors. A doctor doesn't tell his patient, I'm suffering. Right.
You say the same thing, like a new bhakta should not be told by senior devotee, I have problems in chanting and not doing my vows. But you can reveal this to a God brother.
Right.
Same,
and that goes back to the first key, having someone you can confidentially talk to about anything. Wouldn't it be nice if we all had 2 or 3 people we could say anything, our innermost desires, our innermost struggles, and we know they're going to keep confidential, and they'll try to help us with that. Wouldn't that be nice? Anyone else?
Nowadays, we have problems that they record. Every phone has a recording system. You can record it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's all kinds of challenges with that. And like in a place like, my son lives in England, and there's CCTV everywhere. Everywhere, the whole country practically is CCTV. It's great, yeah, it's wild. Anything else on this? CCTV, short, what is it? Closed circuit, all the cameras everywhere. Okay. Insulation and not isolation. And I'm really glad David Kinandan was here, because I think of him sometimes when I think of this. First of all, not the first line. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. I'll explain in a few minutes. But we know the Shastra, right? Asat Sanga Tyag E Vaishnavachar. And that one should avoid associating with. Asat means non-devotees. Their association we should renounce, right? And in that part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's 3 or 4 verses, one after another, that reinforce this same principle, right? That we should be very careful about associating with non-devotees, because, there's a saying in Portuguese, tell me who you associate with, and I'll tell you who you are, right? And was it Ravana or Hiranyakashipu said that we are like crystals, and that if you put it next to something red, it'll appear red? Hiranyakashipu, yeah, okay. But we are more in touch with the world than in Prabhupada's times, right? Isn't it? We are. That's what I was saying about David Kinandan. He deals with these big industrialists and some of the top leaders in India, and he's, he develops these relationships with them, to help spread Krishna consciousness. And we also know that Prabhupada used to say things and do things to protect us a little bit from the outside world, right? He told us to avoid mundane newspaper. What did he say newspapers were good for after one day? Yeah, I think he said wrapping fish. Yeah, wrapping fish, right, yeah. And he even used the word karmis. We sometimes think it's not so politically correct today, but he would, right? There were things that he would say and even tell us things about the world that were very different than how most people saw the world. And these were all things that kind of kept us, protected us a little bit. Yet, to influence the world, we must this is the other thing that reminded me of David Kinandan. We deal with leaders, and he even said in this, one of my one of my letters that a letter that Prabhupada wrote that gives me a lot of inspiration, was to Balavanta Prabhu in 1972, when Prabhupada was talking about college preaching in the US. And he said, they're a little puffed up, college students in the US. It was 1972. He said, but they deserve it. It's their karma, right? And he said, the way to attract them is to listen to them. And he gives the example of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Lord Chaitanya, that he listened to him for 7 days without saying a word. And he also gives the example of the first chapter of the Gita. He says that Arjuna was speaking so much nonsense, but Krishna patiently heard. Right? Adharma, Bibhavad, Krishna, Pradushanti, etc. And then he said that after listening to them, he said, appreciate their point of view. 1972 in America, college students, they probably had 4 points of view: drugs, sex, rock and roll, and Mayavad philosophy. But he said, still, you appreciate their point of view, slowly, this is how you deal with intelligent people. He said like that. So he said to listen to them. So we have this balance that we need to find, right? And I think a lot of it is to remember that we're really here to please Krishna, not necessarily please the sentiments of the non-devotees, but that doesn't mean we don't adjust things sometimes in order to attract them to Krishna consciousness. So that balance of insulation and not isolation, I think, is important. If we just give up isolation completely and we just kind of merge into mainstream society, I think we would probably all agree that's one extreme that we want to avoid. And on the other hand, if we want to just all become, monks and just, chant 64 rounds a day and not much outreach, right? And knowing what's going on in the world, that's the other side. but finding this balance. I remember Rameshwar Prabhu told this story of, in 1973 in America, the biggest thing everyone knew about was the impeachment of President Nixon. And these people who pretended to be plumbers and snuck into the opposite party's office to try to get information. Right? They dressed as plumbers. So one time, Rameshwar Prabhu was in his saffron, he was sannyasi at that time, and he's sitting next to this guy, and the person said, well, what do the Hare Krishnas think about Watergate and the plumbers? And Rameshwar said, Watergate? Plumbers? What are you talking? He had no idea what he was talking. Everyone else in America knew what he was talking. He had no idea what it was. So that may be one extreme. But I think this is an important principle to find this balance. What are your thoughts? Yes, Madan Gopal Prabhu.
Thank you. I think this is a very critical point. And an analogy I can think of is in the corporate world, there's this thing called corporate networks. And then there's the concept of a firewall that protects the network from the outside. But we still have to connect to the outside. It's not like we're disconnected. And the more expensive the firewall, the more sophisticated they are. We allow more, but to filters at a very finer detail. And I think this comes with the sense of maturity as we know what to let in and what not to. So that when we're young, we don't let much in at all, because we want to protect ourselves. But then as we get more and more sophisticated, understanding what's good with asatsamidhyat and how much it influences us, we get a better feel and become more sophisticated in filtering. But it's not merely a matter of protecting and policing what goes in and out, but also another analogy I've heard in the Bhagavatam class somewhere is the fight between a mongoose and a snake. The mongoose fights the snake and it's in battle, but the mongoose stays close to the herb, a bushel of herbs that the mongoose that strengthens the mongoose. So every time the snake bites the mongoose takes a break from battle, goes and sniffs the herb, which counteracts the poison and comes back stronger and fights and it beats the snake. So the point is that we are in the world, we're preaching, we have to go and meet these people, we even have to go to their parties sometimes, raise funds and so on. But then when we come home, we have to recognize that just that association has, it's like snake bites to us. We have to recognize in a subtle way, and so we must take that herb much more deeper and stronger, and then go and fight again. So it's both, not just policing what goes in and out, but also doubly strengthening our sadhana and what we take in to nourish our spiritual body.
Nice. And before David Kidanapur speaks, Prabhupada said to be like a lion on the chase and a lamb at home. I think sometimes we're lambs on the chase and lions at home.
Good point. Prabhupada said that I'm son of
You're a son of a farmer. Uh-huh.
So farmer, they have good faith. They put their seed in the soil. They don't know what will happen, but their faith in God that it will come up, and the crop does come. Same way, going to meet these karmis.
Meet this
Going
karmis.
out, karmi what is there?
Yeah.
Going to meet out, karmi is like putting your seed in the soil. You hear them very nicely, and this way they become your friend. Don't take their sangha, give your sangha. That's most important. If you start taking their sangha, then you become like them. But if you give your sangha, then they will become like us. I mean, they will not become like us, but they'll be sympathetic and so on and so forth. That's one thing. Second thing, as you said, socialization is like, we just gave fundraising seminar.
I heard it as I was walking in.
And one of the things was socialization. The socialization is like drinking a poison, but it neutralized by our strong sadhana. Sadhana is
Very nice, very nice. Sometimes for business, I have to go, and people ask you out for lunch, so what do you do? So I only just order a salad and olive oil. But then people say, well, why are you a vegetarian? Then you can actually talk to them about Krishna. It's actually quite cool. Everyone at work knows that I'm a devotee now. It's kind of fun. Yes?
So I remember one of the incident with Holiness Indradumna Swami. So he was giving a talk and he mentioned about it. He was traveling in a train from Bangkok to somewhere else. And in the flight, just in the cross side, there is a Buddhist monk. He was also flying with him. So he was looking, just they say Hare Krishna, just a little bit introduction.
Hold the mic like that, yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. So after that lunchtime when everyone is coming to provide lunch,
Yeah.
so he saw that he is ordering lunch, the Buddhist monk, like chicken.
Right.
Something like that. So then Indradana Maharaj, after he ate everything, then Indradana Maharaj was asking him, what made you, because you are a monk and he was a Buddhist, means you guys are preaching non-violence, Hinsa Parama Dharma. What made you? And he was saying, well, I don't find anything, and nothing is available. This is the one. Then Indradana Maharaj opened his box, and he got like samosas, puris, and various things, and he was, can you take something? Then he gave something. Look, how come we are finding things? Just a matter of, even though associated with the mundane people, but you can transform them.
Very nice. Thank you. Can you give the mic to Naveen and Naradu?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Brad. Even in our own institutions, sometimes this scenario is happening. So how do you deal with, you spoke about fatigue, a certain type of fatigue that can come
Compassion fatigue is what I spoke about.
Compassion fatigue, hearing other people's stories, their problems, their views, their opinions, their campaigns, their ranting. How do you deal with it? Not to become insulated or callous or jaded, or listen, with a lot of buffers and filters and all that, because it just takes away from the experience, individually from our bhakti experience, but also as a community. You find that people just want to push through their ideas, but they're not really so much interested or in touch with what the bigger picture is.
Well, that's a big. Were you asking me personally because of my service, or just more?
Both.
Because for those, I think I mentioned before, one of my services that devotees, as the ombudsman for ISKCON, is people come to me with their problems, mainly their conflicts. So personally, I find what's helpful is sadhana and a good sense of humor. Yeah. And also good, because I work with other devotees and some very senior devotees like Yogeshwar Prabhu and Brahmatirtha Prabhu. And because we have all the promise of confidentiality, we can talk about things, and so that Sanga really helps. Gosh, I was going to say something else. And this is a big question, a big discussion, but I think one of the other keys is in our temples is to develop a mood of community, a mood of caring for each other, a mood of talking openly, and a mood of service to one another. And I know these are fancy things that we all can say in a microphone very easily, but that mood of having a community can really be helpful. And I'm sure there's seminars about community building. You could probably give one. Is that all right? And so we go on to the last key. Oh, yes, Maharaj. Could we pass the mic? But interesting, I can deal with other people's conflicts all day long, and I've studied the theory and I know what to do and all that. And when I'm in a conflict, all the theory goes out the window, and I forget anything, and I deal like everybody else. That's life.
Yeah, I'm amazed at how these interrelate. So once we looked at so far. As the other devotee was saying, that we don't take the association of other, like the karmic people, but we give them association.
Yeah,
that's usually what I was saying too. I was about to say that.
Yeah, David Kananda Prabhu was saying that.
However, I think it needs to be clarified a little bit more than that. That what do we mean by taking association or giving association, as far as I can understand? Taking association means you hear from them what you should do.
Uh-huh.
Whereas giving association, you tell them innovation to.
Right.
And I think that's the main thing there. That when you're taking association means you're vulnerable to hearing from others and reviewing your life in their consciousness to filter their way of looking at things, which, if done with the wrong persons, is disastrous.
Right.
It's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
So that's why we can be out on Sankirtan, tell people all kinds of things. We're not so much contaminated by them until we actually ask them or we start to mimic them or whatever it
Right.
is. And this ties back to the idea of innovation, I think, that every form of innovation is a door that swings two ways.
That's what Samita was saying also, yes, yes.
That as a person can innovate to bring people into Krishna consciousness, it can also take people out of Krishna consciousness. It becomes a springboard for some kind of mentality of devotees to go the other way. And I've seen it. That's why I think that innovative preaching needs to be done by people who are pretty stable in Krishna consciousness and already have their sense of where they're going. Otherwise, people think something strange might be leaving Krishna consciousness.
Mars, that is the perfect introduction to the last slide. Perfect introduction. Couldn't have gotten any. Oh, wait, no, the second to last. We still have two. I better hurry up. Right? Keep it simple. Right? Even though we do innovative things and we build a TOVP and we do this and we do that and we come up with so many creative ideas, I'm going to go back to that. I'm going to go back to, because it was the perfect segue for the second. But keep it simple. This is our strength, right? When it comes down to it, this is our strength. Rupa Goswami mentions 59 angas of bhakti in Nectar of Devotion, and then he repeats 5 again at the end of that list of 59. And these are the 5, Panchanga Bhakti, sometimes called Swarup Siddhi Bhakti. But this is our shelter. Right? And so we may do all kinds of innovative and creative things, but this, we have to make sure that we keep these 5, because this is the spiritual energy that comes from these things. Someone know the Sanskrit from Nectar of Devotion? That's... Yep, Bhagavad, yep. Bhagavad Shravan? Very good. So that was the segue from there. Now I'll go back to the second to last one. And this will be the last one we do, because time is almost up. We want to be highly organized, right? We know, probably many of us know the famous quote, I believe Giriraj Swami was sleeping on the roof of the Gurukul in Vrindavan, and he gets a message, come to see Prabhupada immediately. He goes to see Prabhupada. Actually, I have the quote here. Prabhupada says, "Do you think this movement can go on without me?" Prabhupada asked. Giriraj was astonished that Prabhupada had called him in the middle of the night to ask him this. "I think," said Giriraj, "that as long as we are sincere and go on chanting Hare Krishna and follow the principles, the movement will be successful." Prabhupada was silent. When he spoke, each word seemed to come with great effort. He uttered the word organization. Then he said, "Organization and intelligence. Is there anything else?" So we definitely need organization, and we all know that we need ISKCON. ISKCON is the vehicle for spreading Krishna consciousness. Right? We may start, if we, anyway, we all understand that, right? That you need an organization to spread Krishna consciousness in the world. Yeah? But we want to make sure that governance, that organization and the way we govern our society is also done with a heart. It's also done with Vaishnava compassion. And so finding that balance between the needs of the organization and the needs of the individual. And sometimes I think one of the tricks of Maya, or at least something we have to be careful about, is sometimes we can substitute some institutional success with our own Krishna consciousness. We think, well, we distributed so many books, and even though I'm looking at my computer while I'm chanting my rounds, it's okay because we were #1 in book distribution or something like that, right? So we want to be careful not to replace those two or think just because we had success in some realm, we still have to be working on our inner life. So if we choke devotees by inappropriate kind of management, they can lose creativity, it can discourage independent thinkers, and it can be that kind of encourage niyamagraha, right? Just making a good show for everybody, but inside hollow. So I think that we definitely need to. There's such a need to be much more organized than we already are. Right? I was listening to Bhakti Rupa Prabhu saying there's 400 centers, big and small, in India. Can you imagine how much organization that takes? Right? But in America we have 67 temples and so many small preaching centers all over the place. So we need to have that organized. Yet we want to make sure the organization has a heart. That makes sense? Some thoughts, comments on this? Nobody here has a heart, or nobody here is organized? Okay, so what were the seven? Anyone remember the 7 keys? I can't remember. Okay. It's Kali. Yeah, come on. It was already an hour ago. Like, how can you expect me to remember? Let's just summarize them again. So someone to talk to, someone you can reveal your heart and mind to. Innovation without compromising Krishna conscious principles. Respectful dialogue and not just trying to defeat people by debate. Seeking deep Krishna consciousness sanely. Insulation, not isolation. Highly organized ISKCON that doesn't lose its heart. And keeping it simple, straightforward, direct Krishna consciousness. So thank you so much for your association. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.